You guys hear me there, Stapleton? Excellent. Okay. Let's see, how do I... Oops. I think I just hung up on Stapleton. Let's try that again. Okay. I'm not sure why this is doing what it's doing. What is going on? What's going on? Gracious. Sorry, I keep reconnecting and disconnecting. My system over here is giving me fits. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started today. We're continuing on in chapter 5 here, and we're going to see if we can get a video up here really quick. Today we're kind of looking at some examples of the engineering process, and there are so many out there, just lots to choose from. We'll go ahead and use some of the ones that are in the book. There's some pretty good ones, and if we need to do some other ones to fill in some more time, we'll do that as well. Let's see if that's going at all. Computer. Okay. So of course we'll go to YouTube. We want to go to alright, let's see if this one tells us here. This is let's see if that's good for us here. Okay, so the first example that we're going to go through is actually it actually starts on page 127 in your book, goes on to page 128, and it's a story about the color TV war. And the interesting thing about color television is that it was actually being worked on, invented, you could say, way before it actually came out to the public. Probably in the 20s was the first color television, and late 20s, and the first black and white television didn't even come out until the 50s almost. And at that time it was just black and white, no color at all. And so color television actually was a very early invention. It just was not used. And there are lots of different reasons that it wasn't used. Some of them are economical, some of them are political, some of them are engineering, technical. And so we're going to explore this a little bit. First we're going to watch this video about Philo T. Farnsworth, who was he's kind of the not founder.
Just how much are America's oil and natural gas companies adding to the U.S. economy?
I hate these YouTube ads all over the place. Drive me crazy. But anyway, Philo T. Farnsworth was one of the inventors of the color television, the inventor of the color television that the concept that we use today, even in the flat screen televisions that we use now, the plasma screens and the liquid crystal screens or whatever they are, they still use the same concept that was invented by Philo T. Farnsworth. They just use different technology to achieve the result. So this is something that's been around a while. RCA was the company that Philo T. Farnsworth was working for. I've actually met his granddaughter. Went to school with his granddaughter, which was kind of interesting. And but anyway, let's see here. What we're going to see here is a video about RCA's development of the color television, and then we're going to talk about some earlier ones here. So let's see if we can make the screen work here. Make the sound work.
General Sarnoff recalls.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the beginning.
Color. This is a world of color, and the men of television long dreamed of capturing the...
And let me get my screen on here now. I'm just realizing that it's not... Well, I guess it is. Are you guys seeing my screen there in Stapleton? My computer screen? Yes or no? Sorry, I didn't see what you... You're not seeing my computer screen. Okay, let's try this again. Inputs. Oh, here we go. This is the thing I always forget to do. Input. So many different buttons you have to push to make this work. You see my screen now? Excellent. All right, so here we go.
Paint pot of nature and brushing it on the screen. How could it be done? It was not an easy triumph, as General Sarnoff recalls.
When we first began to think of television in the early 20s, we would have been content if only the roads would have been televised in black and white. That miracle had no sooner been achieved when the eye, sensitive to color, observed that the rows in monochrome lacked its true beauty, and the cry went up for color. Never had scientists been put under such pressure and demand. It has been my privilege and a fascinating experience to watch the scientists at work on color television.
I would have to disagree with that statement that never had scientists been put in such demand. Under such demand, that's certainly not true. You could point to several instances before that, just before that, in World War I, when the machine gun was first invented. Scientists were put under pretty heavy demand to defend against the machine gun and to develop other weapons similar to it, so that it wasn't just one country that was wiping people off the face of the earth, so we could all do it equally, right? So that certainly times of war, scientists and engineers are put under great stress to invent something new, to develop something new, to provide something new. But there are other instances as well, plenty of other instances. Another circumstance where scientists and engineers were kind of under heavy scrutiny, I suppose you could say, during the early part of the 20th century. It's just escaped me. I was just thinking of one that's the delivery of electricity and light bulbs. When the light bulb was first invented, it was not very commonly used because they were expensive. Electricity was not delivered everywhere. But it wasn't long before people were clamoring for this, because just at the flip of a switch, you'd have light in your house, and you wouldn't have to worry about your gas lines going through your house. Gas explosions during that time were very common, and many people died from them or were injured from them. So electricity was a huge thing that engineers were put under a lot of pressure to deliver. So not the only thing. Indoor plumbing was another good one. Indoor plumbing that worked.
I marvel at their accomplishment in bringing into focus the principles of radio, optics, electronics, photography, chemistry, and many other essentials, so that they might all work together to make color television practical. I congratulate the RCA scientists, researchmen, and engineers who pioneered and developed this new science and art, and then created the compatible color television system and the famed color picture tube.
Color. Color, the touchstone of reality, the vivid, pulsating miracle that gives substance to shadows, beauty, grace, and enchantment to a picture. Problem: how to harness a stream of electrons for color. Early, General Sarnoff had set forth the fundamental goals for color television. First, it must be all electronic. Second, it must be completely compatible. These were the goals.
So what are we talking about here? Right now we're talking about defining the problem and putting out some specifications. What are the actual things that we're trying to do? These are steps in the design process. If we go back to our design process, we have the first step being identify the need and define the problem. So the need or the desire was to have color television. Defining the problem, well, defining the problem they're about to do, but they also are starting to identify constraints and criteria for success. Notice that those two things are steps 1 and 3. They haven't even assembled a design team yet. Well, maybe they had, maybe they hadn't, but maybe they don't assemble a design team until they start identifying constraints and criteria for success. He said that he wants it to be practical, he wants it to be all electronic, and he wants it to also be compatible. Compatible with what? Well, the television was already out there. Black and white TVs had been sold by RCA by the tens of thousands, and they didn't want people who had bought a black and white TV for $300 or $400, which is what they cost back in 1950, and that's a lot of money in 1950. We're talking, cars only cost just over $1,000 then, most cars. I mean, you're talking a lot of money. That's a major investment, and pretty much only the wealthy could afford a television when they first came out. And so you can't ask somebody to, spend that much money on a TV and then turn around and have to buy another one. It's just ridiculous. These days we don't think much about it because we buy our cars with loans, and we just have loans that keep going on and on forever. We're a generation of people that are going to die in debt. We're a generation of people that are going to have to work until we're 90 just to survive. However, the people back then were not that way. There was not, money just available for loaning to people, and they didn't want to be in debt. They wanted to retire someday. So they're already going through this process of identifying the constraints and the criteria for success right here at the beginning. And that was done by the president of the business, not by the engineers necessarily. Now the engineers are going to get in there, and they're going to start to put more details on those constraints and those criteria, and start putting specifications on designs and brainstorming and other things. So let's take a look.
The road was long, difficult, but it led to one of the historic inventions of our times, the RCA tricolor television tube, the tube with the heart of a rainbow. The lens of the color television camera collects light rays in full color from the scene being televised. Within the camera, an ingenious system of mirrors breaks down the light rays into television's 3 primary colors, blue, green, and red. They are focused through the lens system to the special camera tubes provided for each primary color, and the primary color signals thus produced are simultaneously processed for transmission. By the miracle of compatibility, color programs can be seen on
So this, in case this wasn't clear, what they do here is they have all the colors coming in here. They split the 3 different colors, so just about every color out there can be split into a combination of green, yellow, and blue. It's not necessarily green, yellow, and blue, it's actually cyan, they're slightly off from what we call green, yellow, and blue, but it doesn't really matter. And all they're doing here with these tubes is measuring the amounts of those different colors during different scenes of whatever it is that you're filming, right? These other lenses up here are for light balancing and for focusing, but all these things do is they tell you how much blue light was in that particular moment of that particular scene, how much green light, how much red light, and then they send out a signal that says how much of that. It also says where it was on the lens, but the thing that they don't tell you here is that there's another part of this that scans the image so that you can tell where the colors go on the screen, in other words. So they don't really show that part in this camera, but it is there. But these signals just tell you how much light in different colors. And then those signals, they get transmitted out, and the television takes those signals and puts them back on the correct place on the screen, where the lens said that they were, at their correct brightnesses. Is that the right word? So that you have the right amount of blue, the right amount of green, the right amount of red in the right spot on the screen. And overall, when you have, thousands and thousands of those little dots with the right colors, which we call pixels today, you get a picture that is a color picture of what you were looking at with the camera, roughly.
By the miracle of compatibility, color programs can be seen on standard black and white sets without any change or adjustment.
So in that case, what they do is they use those three signals and they put them into a grayscale. Essentially, colors show up as a grayscale environment. So if you have a dark blue somewhere, it just shows up as a dark, gray, almost black. But a dark green won't be nearly as dark as a dark blue, so it'll show up more gray, less dark gray. And a red will show up even less dark, so that you get your red colors come out as much lighter colors in general. So you get the black and white screen, which we call grayscale these days, where this awning over here might be a blue and white kind of awning, but this house right here might be a red. It might be a red brick house, right? In real life.
Color receivers,
And
which
you
can
can see
also
that
pick
there.
up standard black and white broadcasts, decode the color information and apply the picture in all its vivid beauty to the tricolor tube. The
Notice
word sets
They
without
actually
any-
show us a difference in engineering between the black and white tube. So the black and white tube had one wire coming in, and all those colors came in on the same wire. All those different signals that the camera produced just came in on one wire. Whereas on the color tube, notice that three different signals come in, and there are three different emitters down in here that emit electrons, actually, to the tube.
decode the color information and apply the picture in all its vivid beauty to the tricolor tube. The world of color. Color captivates attention and brings the beauty of creation close to home. Color transforms the commonplace into the beautiful. It makes the humdrum memorable, gives new power to advertising and merchandising. Color, the fabric of the rainbow riding piggyback on an invisible stream of electrons. The Tournament of Roses in Pasadena, California. Telecast in color by 21 stations of the NBC network in the first west to east transmission in color on New Year's Day, 1954. All the glory, all the reality of nature.
I'm trying to
With the added
There
dimension
you
of
go.
color,
get more into the engineering part of it here. So.
with the added dimension of color, television programming probed new horizons. Is the techniques to
I actually don't want to talk about
scientific
TV
and
television.
artistic triumphs.
Okay, so I
The
think we're
entire
done.
world will stream in.
I think we're done with that one for the moment. The interesting thing is not just the color TV, but the fact that this wasn't the only idea for color TV. So what we're going to look here is, we're going to see if we can find a different one here. At the same time that RCA was developing that particular developing that particular color television system, another scientist or slash engineer was developing a different type of television. In fact, it was well before the one that they did at RCA. And let's see if we can find. It was at NBC where they did this. Let me see if I can find a. That's actually the symbol that they used at the time. Okay, so let's actually, I'm guessing this is going to be the,
In 1933, a young man from Budapest, Hungary, decided to come to the United States to see if he could find backing for developing a new communications medium, television. The young man was Dr. Peter Goldmark. By 1940, 7 years later, he had developed the first practical color television set, a milestone in the history of communications.
Okay, so 1940, he developed the first practical color television set. 1941 was when we started broadcasting in black and white. So why didn't we broadcast in color? Why broadcast in black and white if we had a practical color television? The reason was really quite simple. Well, there were quite a few reasons, but the technical reason was quite simple, and it was because the television was not all electrical. It was partly mechanical. Let's see if they talk about it here. If they don't, then I will.
Now 70, Dr. Goldmark heads his own successful company, through which he continues to think about man's needs and what can be done to fulfill them. A physicist who likes to develop systems, he searches for missing links in scientific knowledge and concentrates on filling the gaps.
Okay, so it looks like they're not going to talk about it here. But this is the guy in 1977 when I was 3 years old. He's dead at this point, I'm pretty sure. But his television was quite different. Let's see if we can find one other thing here called a spinning disc color TV. Really quick here. Yeah, so here we go. I guess they're not really going to show it very well. There's a magic trick that shows the concept. The idea, though, is that you can actually use a spinning disc, a spinning wheel, with light hitting it to produce color. And what they would do is they would use, and they actually have a picture of this on page 128 in your book. Let's switch to that really quick. Source stock cam output. Let's take a look at it here really quick. Eventually it'll come up here, I think. Okay, so here it is. So this is page 128. Let's zoom out a bit. So here's a picture of the configuration. Zoom a little bit more here. Bless you. So here you have one single wire coming into your tube. There's an electron gun here, which is your emitter that shoots electrons at the screen. And on the screen you have a coating that causes the screen to glow. And the electrons hitting the screen is what causes the screen to glow. And here you have your green, your red, and your blue signal all on one wire coming into this. There are different frequencies. And the different frequencies will actually kind of activate different optical illusions. When you put this spinning colored disc, in front of the tube, and the light will go through the spinning colored disc, and these different frequencies will activate different colors in the spinning colored disc. And so as part of the screen that has a gray color that's supposed to be yellow would activate the green part of the screen more than anything else, and it would appear to be yellow. But all of the colors would activate kind of mixtures of these things. And it's kind of an optical illusion, really, in the end, but it does create, and it can create, color television, right? Why would you not want to have a spinning disc inside of a television? Well, just like today, people had their televisions on all the time back then. And people figured that that it would be a very highly sought after form of entertainment and form of information, getting information. And so if you have something on all the time and it's spinning all the time, that requires a motor, it requires bearings, it requires grease in the bearings, it requires, lots of things that are going to be worn, a lot of wear and tear on them. And so it wasn't a very practical thing. But the great advantage of this was that it was already compatible with the television cameras they used. You could bring all these three colors in and it was no problem. But it turned out to not be the one that they used in the end. It was RCA that won out in the end, and there was a big fight. I'm sorry, I lied to you. The CBS signal was not compatible. The CBS signal was not compatible with the television signal being used at the time. The RCA one was. And that's actually one of the big reasons that RCA won. They won, both of these reasons. The RCA won because they had no moving parts in their television, so they would last longer. And believe me, they last a long time. Many of those original RCA televisions are still available. You can still buy them from antique dealers, and they still work. But the other reason was because they were compatible and the CBS one was not compatible. So how does the RCA one work? And we never really got to that point. Here's the RCA one where you have those signals coming in on 3 different wires into 3 guns, and those electrons just go out to the screen. Well, on the screen you have little pixels, and each pixel has a red, a green, and a blue phosphor, a red and green and blue little piece of chemical on it. And for each of these different frequencies, one of these things would light up more or less or whatever, and it would create those color pixels. And that was the difference. What is the advantage of this one? What is another advantage of this one? Well, with this one, all your little pixels on the screen didn't have 3 colors in them. They just had either white or nothing. It was just varying levels of gray, essentially. This one has 3 on it. So you could fit onto this screen 3 times as many pixels, actually a little bit more. You could fit more pixels, and you get a higher resolution on these other TVs than you could on this one, because you had to fit 3 of these little phosphors into this thing. So the color TV that won did have some disadvantages, but its advantages won out over the disadvantages in the end. What is the point of showing you this? Well, the point is that there's often, and most often, there's always, actually, different ways to go about solving a problem or answering a question or meeting a need. And these different ways can be vastly different. These 2 methods of creating a color television are extremely different, particularly in the way of projecting that color to the user. But they had advantages, they had disadvantages, and one of them won over the other. Does the best design always win? No, it doesn't. Does the design that answers the question the best always win? No, it doesn't. There are countless examples of this throughout all engineering history. Sometimes those reasons are engineering reasons, sometimes they're political, sometimes they're economic, sometimes they're just accidents that the bad design wins. A good example of this is in World War II, when the Allied forces were going to storm the beaches in France. The people who took the most losses were the American forces. And Americans write their history as if that was some heroic thing. But really it was stupid engineering. The English, on the other hand, took very few losses. And the reason was because they engineered their attack and they engineered their machines that did the attack much better. We had so many people that died drowning at Normandy that it's just ridiculous. They drowned because their entry vehicles sunk. You know, these amphibious vehicles that were supposed to be able to float on water did not. They were poorly designed, poorly constructed. They died because they got stuck on the beach in barbed wire. What a ridiculous thing to get stuck in. We know how to clear barbed wire, but we didn't develop machines that would clear it well enough. We just figured we'd throw them on the beach and let them crawl through it. It was a stupid call. It was a bad, bad mistake. The English developed tanks that would tear through the barbed wire, and they decided that their soldiers would walk behind the tanks. Much more practical. And they didn't have any problems getting stuck under sniper fire and machine gun fire on the beaches. In the end, all the lives that were lost in Normandy were not necessarily lost because of brave men and women saving Europe from the Nazis. They were lost by stupid mistakes and stupid decisions made by both military personnel, political personnel, and engineers, unfortunately. Not a story you'll hear told in America very often. And it's understandable why. Nobody wants to take responsibility for that. You know, nobody from the president down to the lieutenant who made his soldiers go into battle. None of them want to take responsibility for that. It's much easier to say, well, it was a heroic battle and we won it in the end. Well, it could have been heroic still, and we could have lost a lot less people. But we didn't. So, these examples that we've gone through today so far are just examples of going through this design process. Of course, both of these people went all the way through the process, or at least, most of the way through the process in developing their design, in modifying their design. If we go back to the design process here on page, whatever it is, 120, 119, they all went through all these steps. Synthesis steps, the steps on analysis, the steps on communication, implementation. They made models, they made prototypes, and they were able to test them, to see that they worked and everything else, but in the end, only one of them won out. There are many other examples of this even recently. Very recently, the battle between what type of high-definition video we're going to use was won by whatever company developed Blu-ray. I can't remember which company it is. I think it's Philips. Philips, I think, developed Blu-ray, or maybe it was somebody else. I don't remember. But anyway, the Blu-ray discs are, of course, the thing that everybody wants now, high-definition video and all this stuff. But they're not the only available high-definition format. There was actually a video disc before Blu-ray that was high definition, just as high definition as Blu-ray. I can't remember what they called it. I think they called it high HD DVD or something like this. There are also several other formats that didn't use a disc like we're used to at all. There was one disc that was actually clear, that used optical encoding instead of digital encoding. It was actually much higher definition than Blu-ray. You could fit 5 or 6 Blu-ray high-definition videos on one of these discs. But for some reason or another, during the process, those were set aside. In the case of the optical one, it just wasn't very practical. It was very expensive to do. They also had a holographic version that was not stored on a disc and spun around in a machine. It was stored in a hologram, a holographic memory module, and it was very, very impractical because we just didn't have the technology to implement that on a large scale. But these things happen. Why do we come up with these ideas? Because we go through this process. We brainstorm. We work through the ideas and we try to develop the best ones we think that are the ones that we think that are the best that we can accomplish. And then sometimes we have to throw out ideas, sometimes we do further development. The process that we go through gets us to the right place in the end eventually. We hope. Okay, so let's take a look now at Let's take a look at now at section 5.2, which is another design example. Kind of a boring one in my opinion, but it is instructive. It's helpful and useful. It's called the improved paperclip. And the reason I can say it's boring is because it's so dang stinking simple. However, it is illustrative. It will illustrate the idea behind the design process. So, on page 131, we have a salesperson working for an office supply company, and recently went to a hospital, and the nurses told him that they need a better paperclip because a patient nearly died when a document was lost from a stack of papers that was connected with an ordinary paperclip. These things do happen, believe it or not. So the nurse had 20 medical records, dropped the stack of 20 medical records that were held together with paperclips. The paperclips failed, the papers scattered all over the place, and the document that was scattered with the rest of them ended up in the wrong file when they picked it up and put it all back away. So they want to make a new paperclip for holding critical documents like medical records. And so essentially they're trying to build a new system for holding papers together. What does this system have to entail, right? So the management of the company, they put together this statement that says we want to develop a highly reliable paperclip for use in high-end applications such as binding medical documents. That's a pretty broad statement of a problem. Identifying the problem doesn't necessarily need to be specific. It sometimes needs to be a very broad thing. We'll get down to the details later when we get the engineers together and we start brainstorming and other things. So we assemble our design team. We definitely are going to want mechanical engineers, maybe materials engineers, maybe a manufacturing engineer, and probably some marketing people, whatever. We want to identify constraints and criteria for success, right? So the marketing expert is going to say we need to keep these things down to $1 per clip. You know, we need to be able to sell them for $1 per clip, not just make them for $1 per clip, but we want to be able to sell them for $1 per clip because we don't think anybody is going to spend more than $1 on a paper clip, even a very expensive one for special documents. Also, the engineers, or maybe you're going to go out and talk to the people in the hospital or somebody else, has to be, they're going to determine how big this thing needs to be, how many papers it needs to hold. And they say anything from 2 to 200 pages. And also they're going to say that if the pages are dropped from a height of 10 feet or lower, that you cannot have any papers breaking out of the stack. So that starts to centralize the problem a little more detail, a little more stuff to work with now. We can start to maybe think about what we're going to do, right? Then our design team was also going to determine that the paperclip should have specific properties. They come up with 4 properties, and these are on page 132. Let me show you that, since I'm not showing you that at the moment. So on page 132, they've made a table, and they've actually given values to each of the 4 things, or the 5 things in this table. So they have reliability is going to have a weight of 5. It needs to be very reliable. Compact design needs to be 3. Weight needs to be 3. Convenience needs to be 5. Low cost needs to be 1. So of course, most paper clips you can buy a box of 500 for $1. We're talking about, you know, 1 paper clip per $1. So it's low cost is not that much of a big deal. Different projects will have different properties that you're going to need to address. So you need to understand those before you really get started. And you also need to understand their relative importance. Can these things change? Absolutely. During the process, you can come back and add things. You can change the importance of things if you think it needs to be changed. But you do need to justify. You need to give some reason for why you have said that this is an important thing and why it's so important. And they do that here. So now we've kind of gone through the first 3 steps of defining the problem and kind of fleshing out what we're supposed to be doing here. Now we need to start figuring out how we're going to do it, right? So this is where we get into our brainstorming ideas, our whittling down the ideas to a certain number of things. And when they do that, they actually come up with 5 wire paper clips. These are not necessarily paper clips that they would use, but maybe these are paper clips that they use when they're researching paper clips. They find these paper clips that already exist, because part of the searching process for a new idea or solution is to see what's already been done. Remember, we talked about that. So these are the types of paper clips that have already been made out there, some kind of goofy ones. This is the one we're all used to, but this one right here is actually designed for holding more papers more securely. This particular design does a better job. It has a wider profile. Anyway, there's lots of reasons why that's good because of these crossed over wires here. It clips the paper between 2 wires, and that turns out to be a very nice thing. Lots of different paper clips out there. So maybe they're going to use these as starting points. Maybe they're just going to get some ideas for materials from these or whatever else. What they want to do, though, is they want to analyze. They want to come up with a bunch of ideas, and then they want to analyze their ideas and start to shave it down to the best ones, right? So once they've gotten their brainstorming down and they've come up with some ideas, they're going to do feasibility studies. Here are the actual ideas that they came up with, much more detailed designs you can see here. And these are the ones that they came up with and started to draw out these SketchUp drawings of. Here's another one. Sorry, I'm going the wrong direction. Here's another one. And you can see that these are very different from the ones from paper clips that are made today. These are more like clamps, right? More like big old poster clamps or something like this. But what they're going to do is they're going to make what is called a matrix of feasibility for each of these options. So they talk about 7 total options here, and they're going to talk about how reliable each one of them would be, how compact the design, what the weight would be, what the convenience would be, and the low cost, all those different properties they wanted to have. And then they give them scores. So here's the weight of each of those that we determined earlier, and then their score is going to be multiplied by the weight. So their score for the first design is a 5, and they multiply it by the weight, which is a 5, and that's 25. So it scores a 25 in reliability for the first design, option 1. And you do that for every option. You see every option scores differently in reliability or differently in the next phase of this. And then you just start giving them each a total score. You add up their total scores. And generally what you want to do is you want to take the one with the highest score, or maybe a couple of them with the 2 highest scores, and compare them again. Maybe think of new ideas. In this case, option 3 is the clear winner with 51 points, which is right here. No, it's not. That's option 5. Option 3 and option 5 have 51 points. But option 7 actually, I guess, had 70 points. I wasn't looking at that one. So option 7 is the clear winner with 70 points. And that's a biggie, right? It scored full score in the 2 most important things, and it scored a full score on the price option as well. So you need to have a way of justifying why you chose the option you did. You don't want to just say, well, we think this one's the best. Well, why is it the best? Well, I don't know, right? I just like it the best. That's not going to fly in engineering. You need to have something that justifies it. And a matrix like this, which is often called a rubric or a matrix, does that very thing. It justifies your decision. Then once you've justified that decision, then you can go through to designing, to more specified design. You can make a prototype, you can test, you can evaluate, you can go back, change it, and do whatever you want to. But that's just one example of using this process. Next time we are scheduled to go through one other example of this process, which is a robotic hand for a space shuttle. A little more complicated, a little more technical. And so we'll go through that design example, maybe look at something else with time. And then we are moving on to our next project. So on Friday we'll come back to this. And then next week we'll start our next project. We're done for today. The homework is still the homework that I gave you for Chapter 5 last time, so you've got time to finish that if you did not. Make sure that you've turned in all your paperwork for the last project so that I can get started grading on those. I've graded almost all the other work in the class, and I will have a grade book up, and I will have it out to you so that you can see how you're doing in the class so far. And we're going to have an exam here soon as well. I don't remember when I took the first exam, but we're going to have an exam at some point. Oh, I didn't put an exam in. So we'll probably have an exam here after Chapter 5, sometime during this next project. Then we'll just cover some of the basics from the book that we've learned so far. So, have a great day. We'll see you guys next time. Arrivederci.
I gotta get some to eat before I go tutor.
Good idea.